Jesus went to his house and reclined at table. A woman who had a low reputation in that town came to the house. She had learned that Jesus was dining with the Pharisee, so she brought with her an alabaster jar of perfumed oil. She stood behind Jesus, crying, and her tears fell on his feet. Then she dried his feet with her hair, kissed them, and anointed them with the oil. When the Pharisee saw this, he said to himself, "If this fellow were the prophet, he would know who this woman is that is touching him, and what a low reputation she has." In answer to the Pharisee's thoughts, Jesus said, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 people owed money to a creditor. One owed the creditor the equivalent of 2 years' wages, the other 2 months' wages. Both were unable to pay, so the creditor wrote off both debts. Which of them was more grateful to the moneylender? Simon answered, "I suppose the one who owed more." Jesus said, "You are right." Turning to the woman, he said to Simon, "See this woman? I came into your house, and you gave me no water to wash my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and dried them with her hair. You gave me no kiss of greeting, but she covered my feet with kisses. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with oil. For this reason, I tell you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven. See how much she loves. But the one who is forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to the woman, "Your sins are forgiven." Those also sitting at the table began to ask among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Meanwhile, Jesus said to her, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." May the Spirit bless us with insight and wisdom through this reading.
And thank you, Diane, so much for sharing that with us. Tony, will you give me one of those stools there, please? So this morning, I'm beginning a series with you. Thanks, Tony. I'm beginning a summer series of talks with you, focusing on different spiritual paths, different spiritual pathways and traditions by which human beings can draw ever closer to God, to the divine source and power and reality that undergirds all of life. I look out at all of you, and you're all relatively different. As I often joke, some of you have more hair on your head than others, and some of you have more girth than others, and we come from different religious traditions and spiritual traditions. We probably have different attitudes and ways of dealing with and approaching the world, and so it would make sense that there would be different approaches that work more effectively for individual human beings in terms of the way in which human beings approach the divine. Ultimately, the divine is the incredible mysterium, the numinous matrix and power out of which all reality comes into being. It's beyond comprehension, beyond definition. And so for there to be any one specific kind of pathway to become more aware of that power and reality in our lives, that doesn't make any sense. So there are many different pathways, many different religious traditions, and they are all honorable, and they all have their own wisdom and their own goodness. So it makes sense that even within the Christian tradition, there would be a whole variety of different pathways to becoming more aware of the divine power and matrix in our life. So I'm going to talk about over the next 6 weeks, there'll be an interruption of 1 week when I'll be gone, but over the next 6 weeks I'm going to talk about a number of different spiritual paths. And this morning I'm going to talk about the path of devotion, which is the pathway of love, the pathway of devotion or love as a way of drawing us closer to God. And then next week I'm going to be looking at the pathway of beauty, an aesthetic approach to God. Then I'm going to be looking at the pathway of knowledge, a more cognitive and intellectual way of developing a deeper awareness of the presence of God in our lives. And then I'm going to move on from there to how we utilize nature, a very common pathway for many, many people. Really immersing ourselves in nature leads us into a deeper sense of God's presence. And from there, I'm going to talk about meditation and different forms of prayer. And then the last pathway, it's actually not a pathway, but I'm sort of referring to it as a pathway, what I call the pathway of release. Different ways in which we tune into, become connected with, and aware of this incredible, numinous, mysterious power that is the source of all life. But this morning, I'm going to focus on the path of devotion, which is also a pathway of love. So I'm going to invite us once again to practice this Jesus sitting prayer. We're going to do it one more time, okay? I'm going to invite us to do it once again. And actually what I'm going to have us do is I'm going to use this prayer. I'm going to use it for each one of the 6 weeks. So by the end of these 6 weeks, I hope that you'll be really familiar with it, and that it might be something that you can actually incorporate into your daily sort of meditative practice. Because ultimately, I want to say to you that the pathway of love is perhaps the most important and powerful pathway. Because love is, we believe in our tradition, perhaps the most fundamentally important characteristic and quality of God. And Jesus sitting is this prayer. It actually comes from the Chinese tradition, but they honor Jesus as well, and that's they've called it Jesus sitting. It comes from the tradition of what's called Qigong. And I actually have the link in my talk, and you'll be able to go to my talk online. And if you want to get the motions and you've forgotten them, they'll be online, so you can look at them and you can practice them at home. Li Chun Feng teaches this, but it honors the quality and the emergence of love in our lives, and is therefore called Jesus sitting. So once again, let's gather our hands together in front of our mouths. And the importance of this is that in order to become filled, in order to invite the universe to fill us with love, we first have to also release and empty ourselves so that more can come in. If we think we're perfect and completed and finished, it won't happen. So we hold our hands in front of our mouth and we breathe, we exhale into our mouths as a form of emptying and release. And then we lower our right hand into our lap, palms up, to symbolize the presence of the earth. And we raise our left hand up towards the sky, the infinity of the cosmos. And we lower our left hand, bringing down the divine, bringing down the cosmos. And we rest it into our right hand. Just allow your left and right hands to cup one another, a symbol of the union and the integration of earth and sky, earth and space, humanity and divinity, which is what we are. And then on the wings of the crane, this great bird of spirit and flight, rest your hands onto your laps in preparation for the formal prayer part of this tradition. As you center your hearts and minds in prayer, open your mind to a receptive stance. Be aware that we live in a matrix of incredible power and energy and spirit. Lift your arms as the wings of a crane and bring your hands together into prayer position in front of your heart. And now, as a prayer to the divine, let our hands rise up Rise up and open, open, open to the power and the mystery and the wonder and most of all the love that surrounds us on all sides, above and below. Open your hands. Let your hands stretch and expand to receive as much spirit and power and love as possible. Open your arms. Widen their stance. Expand your chest. Open your rib cage and your lungs and your whole torso. And most of all, open your heart. Visualize divine light and energy and spirit that is filled with the presence of love, filled with the presence of wisdom and love, flowing out of this incredible matrix of power into our hands, through our arms, into our chest and torso, and ultimately into our hearts. Release mind, release skepticism, release doubt. Just be open. Open to the transcendent power and wonder of God, to the great love of God's being. And then bring your hands together. Gather as much of that spirit and energy and power and love. Gather it as though it is a luminescent, radiant ball of light shimmering, pulsating like your own heart with love and power, and hold it in front of your own heart. And the more you do this exercise, the more you'll become sensitized to the energy field that actually exists between your hands. You can actually move your hands a little and imagine, feel, intuit. There's this incredible ball of radiant energy and love that you are holding. Feel the perimeters and the edges of it. And imagine the love in your heart flowing into this ball, becoming radiated and coming back into your heart. So there is this exchange between you and this divine energy, flowing in and out, filling you, renewing you. Just as the body and the blood renews the air, oxygenates the blood with the air, you are oxygenating your whole being with spirit, radiance, and love. Let it flow into you. Visualize luminescent light. And then release it. Release it back into the divine matrix. And allow our hands to come back together, back to back, down to connect with the earth, and then up to say thank you to the heavens. And then bring your hands down in front of your heart. And as you do so, allow yourself to feel a profound sense of gratitude. What emerges out of love is gratitude. Gratitude for the gift of life. Gratitude for the gift of sharing life with one another. Gratitude for so many blessings. And gratitude for the gift of love itself. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Then with the motion of the wings, cranes, release the prayer and bring your hands back down to your legs in completion. Contemporary science teaches us today that this invisible space that seems empty, we all know it's not empty. It's filled with oxygen. It's filled with all sorts of chemicals and presence of life. Science also suggests today that what appears to be empty space is also filled with what's called dark matter and dark energy. They call it dark matter and dark energy because we cannot see it. But they know theoretically that only the presence of this incredible presence of dark energy and matter, only that concept can explain for many of the phenomena in the universe. Within the spiritual traditions of the world, we suggest that this supposedly empty space between us is actually permeated by the presence of divinity. It's permeated by the power, the numinous energy, and for want of a better word, we call it spirit. It permeates and fills all of this space. It's here all the time. The old tradition was that God was up in heaven and someplace apart from the earth. That's not what we believe. God is here. What the spiritual traditions say to us is that this power and presence of God is a matrix of not just energy or power, but it's a matrix of intelligence. It's a matrix of wisdom. It's a matrix of incredible love. So we are embedded in the way a fish is embedded in the ocean, the way a fish is surrounded by the ocean. The fish says, "What am I in? What is this thing around me that I can't see?" It's the water, you silly fish. We're embedded in divinity. We're in this incredible reality. What the spiritual traditions of all the traditions of the world also say is that embedded as we are in this incredible matrix, the difficulty for us in life as human beings is that our nervous systems are insufficiently refined and tuned to actually experience the subtlety and the wonder and the mystery of this incredible power and love in which we're embedded. But people who experiment and practice energy work and working with an energy field become sensitized to the presence of a mysterious energy and power that the body can become tuned to. But because of the distractions of our everyday lives and because of the limitations of our nervous system, we don't see it, we don't feel it, and very often as not, we don't even believe it. But what the spiritual traditions of the whole world also suggest is that throughout history, there have existed a rare group of individuals who are born into this world with a unique capacity to tune into that incredible domain of energy and wisdom and love that surrounds us all the time. And Jesus was one of these rare and unique beings. And finally, what the spiritual traditions of the world say is that when people experienced these rare beings, like a Jesus, within their lives and beings, that this incredible power and this energy and this spirit manifested through them as an incredible capacity to love. That the beings who are in touch with this have all manifested this incredible capacity to love, which is why we extrapolate that love is of God. That love is the fundamental characteristic of God, because the people who are most in touch with God are people who are so profoundly loving. And this is what we experience in this gospel story with Simon the Pharisee this morning, right? From Luke. It's interesting that Simon is a Pharisee. He's a traditional religious leader. And this is the interesting thing in the Gospels, that very often in the Gospels, Jesus is, and the Gospel writers themselves note that sometimes traditionally religious people are the last ones to really get it, right? They're the least ones to get it. And maybe that's because their impressions and understanding of God are so boxed into a particular format that they can only experience God in a certain way. But so Simon is a Pharisee and a traditionalist and has his set ways of worshiping, and he invites this sort of itinerant preacher who he's heard about, this Jesus of Nazareth character, into his home and sort of wants to check him out, sort of thing. And in the process, he doesn't demonstrate with Jesus or honor Jesus with even the most traditional ways of showing courtesy and respect and caring for someone in his society. He doesn't wash Jesus' feet. For one, he doesn't give them the traditional kiss for the other. And so instead, the story tells us, while Jesus is at his house, there's this woman who comes, and she's an unnamed woman, if you'll notice that, and means that she had no status in her society at all. No respect, no status, and she was actually, the writing suggests, of an unsavory kind of character. But it's this woman who comes to Jesus, and her heart is just overflowing with love. It's filled with love. And she washes Jesus' feet with her tears. She wipes his feet with her hair. She places oil on his feet to anoint him. And Jesus says, "Hey, Simon, you notice the contrast here? Your heart is so boxed up. Your heart is so constricted. You haven't even shown the basic fundamentals of love, whereas this woman, her heart is so profoundly open to love and to God and to Jesus. And Jesus' heart opens to her in response. It's incredible love that they share. The spiritual path of devotion is a path of releasing, of unboxing our hearts, unlocking our hearts, so our hearts can move beyond their normal constrictedness and flow more fully for the world and everyone. A spiritual teacher of mine once said, God is like a light bulb. Okay? God is like a light bulb. And he said, for most of us, we kind of love the people that we're close. We love our kids. We love our intimate partners. Maybe we love our family members. And we've got enough love for those people in our lives. And so when you come to God, it's kind of like you want God to love you, right? God, love me and do good things for me and keep an eye on me. And he said, but God isn't like that. God is like a light bulb. If you walk into a room with a bright light shining from the ceiling, would you say, "Oh, hello, the light bulb just noticed me"? The light bulb just shines. It shines everywhere. on everyone fills the space equally. It's what God's love is like. The spiritual path of devotion is trying to unlock our hearts, to open our hearts so that we can feel love and project and radiate love, not just for our little circle of intimates or family, but that love can start to move out and embrace the wider and the larger world. That our love can see the whole world as being part of God's life and God's being and deserving of love. This past week, I know I'm getting older when I'm going back to music I used to listen to years ago. I listen to a lot of contemporary music too, but I've got a long history of music that I love. And some of you will know Phil Collins, right? And Phil Collins, former drummer for Genesis, and then went on to have a wonderful solo career. And Phil Collins, I've been listening to a song by him this past week as I'm driving the car. You remember that song, Just Another Day in Paradise? Beautiful, beautiful song written by Phil Collins, talking about first world tourists traveling in the developing world. And he talks about the actual specifics in the song are there's this tourist walking in some streets in a developing country, and he sees a young girl who's in poverty and who's been moved on all over the place, as he puts it in his words, who's just having a struggling life, and he walks over to the other side of the street. He wants to ignore her, all right? And Collins' song is about how can we open our hearts more profoundly to not just our intimates, but to the entire world. How can we feel that love and let that love touch us? See, the problem with that kind of love is that when we open our hearts to love, we also open our hearts to pain, right? Because when you open your hearts to love, you become aware of the pain of others. And in loving them, you also absorb the pain. And often we don't want to feel that part of it. And so we shut down our hearts. Jesus sitting is kind of a meditative process and technique that encourages us to invite the love of the divine into our beings and into our lives, to fill with that love ever more fully, and to allow that love to shine ever more profoundly through our lives in broader and broader and wider concentric circles. This week, going to invite you as you go into your week. And maybe you go online and you say, oh, what was that prayer that David did in church the other day? And Monday morning you go online and you just take a minute. Jesus sitting. Ooh, invite love into your heart and being. Hold it in front of you and bring it close. Try to watch yourselves this week for situations in which love shuts down, in which the heart contracts rather than open up. Just become aware that we all do it. We all do it in our own ways and at our own times. Just become aware of that. That's the first step. Become aware of how we shut down on love so often. And then just invite the divine to flow into you, to be a source of love in those situations. Namaste. The Spirit in me honors the Spirit in all of you. Amen.
the man from Galilee who claims to be the living way. Have you seen the look of love he gives, or sensed the power his words convey? Once you've met the man from Galilee, he who calms the storms and makes blinded eyes to see. You will never be the same again. He will change your life and set your spirit free. Have you met the man from Galilee who calls himself the Son of God? Have you followed him to Calvary, or traced the path his steps have trod? Once you've met the man from Galilee, he who calms the storms and makes blinded eyes to see. I know you will never be the same again. He will change your life and set your spirit free. You will never be the same again. He will change your life and set your spirit free.
Beautiful, Tony. Thank you. And thank you, David. There are many forms of devotion. We are devoted when we lovingly commit ourselves to a person and or to our family, to an organization like this church, to a cause or a belief. Devotion is a self-promise that despite complications and problems, you will remain faithful and loyal until a time comes when it is necessary to part, to change, to expand, and to explore new possibilities. A devotion can also be a practice that connects you to Spirit every day. For some it is prayer, meditation, yoga, qigong, or communion with nature. It is a time when you put down all the things that you have to do and relax into a state of reverence and peace. It is a way to feel God within you. As we all know, to maintain a devoted relationship or a practice can be difficult. but it is also incredibly rewarding to find that peace, that silence, that wholeness. I'm going to read a very short poem by Dana Folds from her book, Go In and In. It's called Walk Slowly. It only takes a reminder to breathe, a moment to be still, and just like that, something in me settles, softens, makes space for imperfection. The harsh voice of judgment drops to a whisper, and I remember again that life really isn't a relay race, that we will all cross the finish line, that waking up to life is what we were born for. As many times as I forget, catch myself charging forward without even knowing where I'm going, that many times I can make the choice to stop, to breathe, and be, and walk slowly into the mystery. Let us pray. Patient Lord, guide us as we try to live lives of reverence, respect, and responsibility to others, to ourselves, to the earth, and to you. Help us gain the patience and wisdom to be true to our beliefs, our relationships, and our chosen form of contemplation. May we learn to deeply love ourselves and others as Jesus loved each of us. May our devotion lead us to wholeness and peace. Amen. We have a closing hymn, and it's an oldie but a goodie, How Great Thou Art.
We're going to swing this one up a little bit compared to how you're probably normally used to singing it.
May all rise.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the works thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe display. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander, I hear the birds sing sweetly in the tree. When I look down from lofty mountain grandeur and hear the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. For our closing this morning, we're going to sing a little chorus that I know you don't know, but another one that's easy. And this is a kind of a, oh, I'm sorry, you have something else to say?
Yeah, always.
Sometimes I just take over, sorry.
You're forgiven. I just wanted to thank everyone for contributing to the service. Thank you, Tony, for the magnificent music, David for the inspiration, and for each and every one of you for coming out this morning and sharing your sunshine with us. May the service, I hope it has inspired you to live with more devotion and more love. And now it's your turn.
You're sure?
Yeah.
So we have a little tradition back home. Well, kind of, sometimes. Anyway, this is a little hugging song. So we're going to sing it. Hug your neighbor. Tell him you love him. Don't say it if you don't mean it. But, yeah. And I love you with the love of the Lord. And I love you with the love of the Lord. I can see in you the glory of my God. And I love you with the love of the Lord. And I love you with the love of the Lord. Yes, I love you with the love of the Lord. I can see in you the glory of my God, and I love you with the love of the Lord. One more time. And I love you with the love of the Lord, and I love you with the love of the Lord. I can see in you the glory of my God, and I love you with the love of the Lord. Yes, I love you with the love of the Lord. Go in God, have a great week.